Okay, Mike, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for being here, whether on the live stream or participants who are on the Zoom call right now. I'm Michael Moriarty. I'm a member of the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education and was appointed by Chair Craven to chair this special subcommittee on pandemic recovery and early literacy. And the sort of task we've been given is to review the full range of issues that pertain to early literacy after receiving some pretty striking reversals in student proficiency following scores from the post-pandemic testing in 2022, both from the third grade MCAS and from the NAEP. So we've been doing a series of meetings going back to last December. And at this point in our process, we probably have a few more to do after this. Today, we are specifically focusing on the topic of educator preparation. As you know, ensuring our workforce in the early grades has the requisite experience and training to deliver high quality instruction to every child is a vital responsibility shared by BESE and our institutions of higher education. And BESE is given a broad oversight authority pursuant to Massachusetts Chapter 71, Section 38G. And by the way, a difficult statute of about 3,600 words, 150 of them buried in there that vest this authority in the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And the pertinent language is actually very, very broad, that the board and the commissioner may approve preparation programs devoted to the preparation of teachers and other educational personnel. A college or university or school or district or other institution offering such an approved program shall certify to the commissioner that a student has demonstrated satisfactory competence in the skills and knowledge expected of college graduates in the most advanced nations and has completed the program approved. So that's a pretty wide brief. And in the BESE website, we know that there are over 75 programs, at least that's reported. I think the number is actually a little lower right now. Claire can clarify that briefly. Under the department's approval authority, about 63,000 students on average are served by first-year teachers who graduate from these programs. In addition, there are some alternative programming that exists. Now, educator participation in Massachusetts and across the nation received considerable public attention last spring with the release of a report by the National Council of Teacher Quality, which focused specifically on the preparation of teaching early literacy. But it was not the only report. Prior to it had its focus on Massachusetts, although it was national in its reach. But within Massachusetts in 2020, there had been another report, much more limited review of programs by the Comprehensive Center Network Region 1 that is published and available, I think, through the BESE website and in the state. And as we will hear shortly, TPI US has also looked under the hood pretty closely at a half a dozen programs here in Massachusetts. And the information, as I think we will hear, was pretty consistent that in terms of instruction for early literacy, there is a pretty striking need for changes in established practices and a lot that we know we could be doing to try to get better outcomes for kids when new teachers are entering our workforce. So that is at the heart of what we want to cover today. We want to, as we've done with all the other topics, hear from BESE about what's going on. And towards that end, my first panel is of two speakers. We have joining us Claire Abbott, who is the Director of Educator Effectiveness since 2021 and has been with the department in several capacities for about 11 years, I believe, a little over. She's responsible for state policy research and resource development in support of educator preparation. She's also a senior leader in BESE's Center for Instructional Support, from which emanates the mass literacy program and from which our state literacy strategic plan is made operational. So she's part of that center core of planners there, which puts you, I think, Claire, in a seat that really matters for all the topics that we take on today. Joining her is Ed Crow, who is the founding CEO of TPIUS, an acronym for Teacher Prep Inspections United States, which, as it implies, is a national organization that reviews teacher preparation programs to determine how the programs can expand their promising practice and address areas of improvement. And just as a little bit of biographical background for Ed, he is the founder and has served in policy and program improvements for initiatives of the U.S. Congress, foundations, higher education agencies, and research organizations such as ABT Associates and AIR, and was also, my goodness, I stole your bio off of your website, Ed, and it printed poorly, but it does mention that you were first director of, I think it says, the Quality Enhancement Program for the U.S. Department of Education, with several other previous policy roles prior to that. So with that introduction, this panel will give us a sense of where we are at in terms of policy and practice, in terms of the department's oversight. We'll hear a bit from Ed about what has been learned with TPIUS's presence in programs, including a couple of the programs that our second group of panelists are involved with. And we'll do some question and answer following that, and then we'll transition to our second panel, which are practitioners in the field actively doing the work. I will let you know, in case she does come in a little bit later, Heather Pesky, who is the director of NCTQ, although we did not have time to include her as a panelist or as a scheduled speaker, may be present on the call, so she would have an opportunity to answer any questions or review any matters of concern, as her organization, I anticipate, will be mentioned in some context. And with that, Claire, I'll turn it right over to you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mike. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So if you could let me know when you can see it, that would be helpful.
Looks that it's there.
Great. All right. Well, thank you again, Mike, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me here today. As the director of the Office of Educator Effectiveness, I'm here to speak specifically to how the department is supporting the preparation of teachers in evidence-based, culturally responsive, and linguistically sustaining early literacy, which is the core lever, or one of the core levers in the larger mass literacy initiative, as you mentioned. And I will be joined today by Ed Crow, the executive director of TPIUS. And TPIUS is a nationally renowned teacher prep inspection organization that's been working to support educator preparation providers for years, and also a really good partner of ours in this work. So later in this presentation, as Mike mentioned, Ed will be sharing with you a little bit more specific information about early literacy instruction in 6 of our educator preparation providers here in Massachusetts that have undergone what we're calling a formative feedback review by TPIUS, and how this investment reflects the broader national movement toward more evidence-based literacy practices in teacher prep. After our collective remarks, we should hopefully have about 15 minutes for questions and discussion before we move over to the next panel. But first, I want to ground us in the reality of literacy in Massachusetts today and why the focus on educator preparation is so essential to the long-term future for our students. So we all agree that teaching, reading, and writing is one of the most foundational skills that we associate with public education. And Massachusetts is regularly cited as a top performing state when it comes to literacy instruction. As you see here, and as Mike already alluded to, we were the #1 state in 4th grade student outcomes in reading, according to the National Assessment of Educational Progress. And this is a position we've held for years, and one that many point to as evidence of our success. and our achievement in this area. But earlier this summer, when the National Center on Teacher Quality published a pretty critical report of how teachers are prepared to teach reading in Massachusetts and in other states, some immediately pointed to this position at the top of this scale as evidence of there not being a problem here in Massachusetts. I would argue that this is a bit misleading, and it really does require us to look under the hood to see what's happening when it comes to how well Massachusetts students are doing. First and foremost, even at the top of the spectrum, as you see here, less than half of Massachusetts students are actually at grade level proficiency when it comes to reading. And this data point is reinforced by our own MCAS results, which showed that only 38% of fourth graders met or exceeded grade level expectations in 2022. Second, when we disaggregate this data, you see large gaps in outcomes by race and ethnicity, with Black and Latinx fourth grade students persistently reading below proficiency, as indicated by those orange and blue lines. And what this graph also reveals is how these proficiency levels, as well as the associated equity gaps, have persisted for almost 20 years, with little to no overall improvement in measured reading abilities across all white, Latinx, and Black students since 2005, even before that pandemic-related decline. So this suggests that the way we've been teaching children to read and write is not working, and that something significant does need to change in order for all of our students to truly thrive. So in the last few years, the department has named early literacy as a priority area and is tackling this from multiple angles, much of which you heard from my colleague, Catherine Tarka, at the May board meetings update on literacy, as well as during this special committee's last meeting in March. Today, I'm going to zero in on efforts related to this last prong of the Mass Literacy Initiative, educator preparation. Mike already shared a few numbers with you. I'm going to share a few more just to ground you and give you a sense of the scope and impact of teacher preparation in Massachusetts. So in 2022, over 1,800 teachers earned a Massachusetts license in early childhood, elementary, or moderate disabilities. And those are the primary licensure areas responsible for teaching children how to read and write. These individuals graduated from one of 47 approved preparation providers in Massachusetts and went on to shape the learning experiences of over 388,000 students in the Commonwealth. And this cycle gets repeated each and every year. So at BESE, it is our responsibility to ensure that these teachers are being trained in evidence-based, inclusive, culturally responsive, and linguistically sustaining literacy instruction. Data from surveys and a syllabi review coming out of the pandemic, however, indicated a real need for change in how our teachers are being prepared. Specifically, surveys of teacher candidates and recent completers in 2020 and 21 found that only 1/3 agreed that there are instructional routines for teaching each component of literacy supported by scientific evidence. According to the 2021 syllabi review of required courses in elementary and early childhood programs across 9 teacher prep programs, some candidates are currently taught little or nothing about key foundational literacy topics, such as decoding and phonemic awareness. And discredited practices like 3Qing continue to be taught in lieu of or even alongside evidence-based practices, which can create conflict and confusion relative to effective teaching and learning strategies. And only half of the syllabi reviewed in 2021 included all components of effective writing instruction, findings that align with national research that suggests educator preparation providers may not be preparing teachers to teach those essential writing skills. At an Ed Prep conference this past spring, a finalist for Massachusetts Teacher of the Year reflected on these gaps in her own preparation, noting that without a complete toolkit, teachers will continue to struggle to help students learn how to read and write, as she did for years until she sought her own professional development in evidence-based early literacy instruction. So this is our commitment, and this is our charge to ensure that by school year 2024-25, aspiring teachers are being prepared in evidence-based early literacy instructional practices through both coursework and field-based experiences outlined in the Mass Literacy Guide. And these will include a focus on how these practices are culturally and linguistically sustaining, such that they continue to advance teaching and learning for all students. I'm now going to walk through the chronology of this strategy and each of the 4 components briefly, so you can see how they are operationalizing. The first step that we took was to revise the Foundations of Reading MTEL. This test was updated and re-released in 2021, and now sets the standards for licensure candidates to have knowledge of scientifically based practices in reading development, comprehension, and foundational skills. In 2022, we partnered with faculty and K-12 literacy experts to develop and publish draft program expectations for early literacy preparation aligned to mass literacy. These criteria articulate expectations for coursework, field-based experiences, and partnerships with K-12 districts. And they cover all aspects of evidence-based literacy development, from language comprehension to foundational skills, reading comprehension, and writing. After these criteria were established, we wanted to make it possible for prep providers to start examining their own program's alignment to these new expectations as quickly as possible, and to start making any necessary changes. We have since invested significant ESSER funds in continuous improvement grants and a partnership with TPI-US to provide optional, confidential formative feedback reviews of ed prep providers aligned to these literacy requirements. These reviews launched in fall of 2022 and will continue to be available for 2 full years so that organizations can take full advantage of the opportunity. And Ed's going to share a bit more about this in a moment. We've also developed new resources to guide classroom observations and feedback in field-based placements. Beginning this year, teacher prep programs will start using a new literacy-specific observation and feedback form to assess student teachers in classroom settings. And by fall of 2024, this tool will be a required part of the performance assessment for all pre-service teachers in early childhood, moderate disabilities, and elementary licensure programs. Finally, all of these pieces come together when we begin a new round of formal reviews of ed prep providers in 2024. So under this authority, which Mike alluded to at the beginning of this meeting, BESE will be conducting deeper program level reviews of all early childhood, elementary, and moderate disabilities licensure programs with a focus on their literacy preparation practices to ensure that they are aligned to the new program approval requirements. These reviews will result in program level approval determinations that range from fully approved to conditional approval, probationary approval, or not approved. And if a program or set of programs receives a conditional or probationary approval status, they will be expected to address any conditional findings within a certain period of time or risk losing their approval. So that is the high-level strategy. We also want to share with you today some insight into what's happening on the ground. So as I noted, in 2022, we contracted with TPI-US to provide formative feedback reviews to all 47 prep providers in an effort to support any necessary shifts or programmatic changes that we anticipated would be necessary. So these are confidential formative feedback reviews. We at BESE do not see the results. And they are based on literacy-specific program approval criteria that were released last year. And all participants receive a $10,000 continuous improvement grant to engage in any necessary changes to their programs and participate fully in the reviews. We invited organizations to use these reviews to get really concrete and actionable feedback on how to improve, and in some cases, prepare for their next formal review. And to date, we've had 6 preparation providers participate, with 6 more signed up for this coming fall, and we anticipate that number to continue to grow. And as part of their partnership with us, TPI US also provides an anonymized summative report at the end of each fiscal year, which allows us to know where there appear to be strengths, as well as areas in need of improvement around literacy preparation, so we can target our supports accordingly. I'm now going to turn it over to Ed Crow, the Executive Director of TPI US, so he can share a little bit more about what they're finding through these reviews and how this compares to the broader national picture of teacher preparation in early literacy. So Ed, I will advance the slides as you'd like.
Okay, thanks, Claire. Appreciate it. And Mike, thanks for the introduction. Just a minute on who we are as an organization. We began in 2013, and since that time, we've completed 300 of what Massachusetts calls formative reviews of teacher preparation programs in 24 states. And a driver philosophically behind that work is the idea of continuous and sustained improvement. So providing evidence-based findings and recommendations to programs that we hope will help them understand where they stand in terms of quality and what they can do to get better. Next slide, please. And so in Massachusetts, this review that Claire's talked about is a part of that overall work. So we work closely with BESE to develop a review framework that's fully aligned with the literacy policies in the state. We ended up with a review framework that has 3 domains, and I'll talk through the findings of each of them. And assuming that you'll have this, that the special committee will have this, all the slides as resources, I will not do a dramatic reading of the slides. But the first domain, the quality of instruction, covers 5 areas. This is fundamentally about coursework in the teacher preparation programs in the early literacy coursework. I want to say also as we start that all 6 of the programs that opted into the work that we've completed so far were highly cooperative with our teams. This was a very new process, really, for all but one of them. And I just want to express my appreciation to the leaders and faculty of those institutions for the work they did with our teams. So domain 1, quality of instruction, is about coursework, and we've summarized the findings on the next slide across the 6 institutions, providing some examples of strength for the committee to see and for the programs to see. So in places where we found strong things to report and talk about with the program leaders themselves, I would call your attention especially to the second bullet, that program of study builds a strong foundation for candidates to develop culturally responsive practices using a variety of teaching tools that enable candidates to both learn what they need to know and learn how to apply it in their own teaching. Areas for improvement here in domain 1 include something that we find across the country in this work: gaps in faculty knowledge of the science of reading, or evidence-based reading instruction, as you call it in Massachusetts. And there's a need, therefore, for faculty professional development and support to strengthen the ability of faculty who want to do a good job to teach future Massachusetts teachers how to convey this information, mastering it themselves and conveying it effectively. And then second, we found, and this is again a common finding in our work in literacy, especially around the country, a lack of clear connections across courses. So the idea that silos still exist at some institutions and in some programs that inhibit systematic sequential development of teaching and knowledge across time. The strengths that are cited on this slide help in a way to set improvement goals for programs that need to get better. The second domain is the quality of field-based experiences. So placement practices, observation and feedback support for candidates, and how proactively programs work with teacher candidates in their field placements. One of the things I'd say here, and is summarizing before moving to specific findings, is quality here across the board in Massachusetts and every other state is affected by the strength of provider-district partnerships. And that's an area where I think an organization like BESE and the State Board of Education that have key responsibilities in both higher education and K-12 can help incentivize, expect, and support greater partnerships. And that is a two-way street, not just the responsibility of teacher education programs. So in terms of the findings in this area, on the next slide, we found, again, some areas of strength, field placements offering lots of opportunities to practice and apply. We found some programs that were actively assessing candidates during those experiences. In other words, how good am I today? What do I need to do next week to get better? Accurate, consistently high quality support and guidance. And an example of an area for improvement is the teacher candidate needs to get accurately assessed by her program supervisor or his program supervisor, both at oral feedback after the lesson and then written feedback to help candidates develop their knowledge and skills. When that's done well, it's also providing information resources to the program to understand how well things are going in a more aggregated way across all candidates. And then secondly here, we found both in Massachusetts and elsewhere, the need to build a better common understanding of what constitutes highly effective teaching and learning in literacy. It can't just be the professor and the candidate, or it can't just be the candidate and the classroom teacher. Everyone has to be on the same page, and that does not happen naturally in teacher education or any other field. Without that, I mean, just to kind of personalize it to a candidate, that teacher candidate is the low status person in the room when a professor, a clinical supervisor, or a classroom mentor don't agree on what high quality teaching in literacy is. The candidate has no way, no status to decide which one of them is right and which one they should follow. So this is where better alignment serves the needs of everybody involved in the teaching and learning activity. The third area of the framework, quality of partnerships. This is a critical aspect of any form of professional education that includes clinical practice. Again, there has to be alignment of expectations. The practice opportunities can't simply be based on a transactional relationship. I have a classroom, you have a candidate, let's make a match. That does not work. It doesn't work in any other field, and it has not worked well in teacher education. And in our studies and reviews across the country in the 24 states I've mentioned, we find really few strong or good partnerships because neither party to what should be a close working relationship is incentivized really by the regulatory structure, by their own internal priorities and needs to make that a joint, deep enterprise where everyone is pulling in the same direction. The disconnects can be profound, and honestly, they won't fix themselves without active intervention and support. So that sets the stage for what we found in this area in the next slide. So in Massachusetts, we found no clear examples of strength in this domain. The examples for areas for improvement, all of which are fixable and doable, inconsistent or insufficient collaboration with schools, lack of a shared vision on what constitutes best teaching and learning practices in literacy in particular, since that was the focus of the work, and the need to improve the processes for selecting those classroom mentors and clinical supervisors, honestly, who use high quality instruction materials with fidelity and are highly effective practitioners. So this is a general area where Massachusetts could align activities and expenditures you're already making in K-12 and higher education by helping teacher prep programs, for example, and school districts to work together and find those mentors who are already trained to use high quality instructional materials in literacy, and to find schools for placements where they've already invested in teacher training and in the use of materials. So again, the transactional relationship is not a partnership. It's the way we have traditionally operated in teacher education. It's, I'll just say, I guess, to reflect the feelings of support for teacher prep programs here, it's easier for us as team members to say this needs to change when the work to do it has to happen locally. but it really does need to happen. There's a need for systematic structures to make this work. And then, kind of summing up from the report to BESE, which I know you have as an attachment to the materials today. Requiring and expecting faculty within programs to work together to map an effective framework. So, for example, in other places where we work, we've developed a mapping structure to help faculty find and build the connections across courses to make sure that systematically and sequentially the key concepts of literacy instruction are being built on as a candidate moves from course to course. We also find and recommend for Massachusetts that there needs to be greater attention given to the learning needs of diverse learners. This is a significant issue in Massachusetts and in many other states. And frankly, this is despite a lot of rhetoric about equity in teacher education. We haven't yet translated the rhetoric into effective action for these students. And then finally, in going back to the partnership piece, making sure that candidates are placed in schools where they'll consistently see good models of high quality early literacy instruction from teachers, from supervisors, in a school environment, climate where school leaders are also supporting the teaching that addresses the needs of every kid in the school. And then, because this is an opportunity, I guess, to kind of pull things together from the work my teams have done, and I get to be a spokesperson, but the real work is being done by the team members and the team leads that those of you on the call have met over the last 6 or 8 months. A couple of things I just say to the committee in closing. You have high quality policy in Massachusetts. The policies and standards in early literacy are strong and ought to be looked at by other states to address literacy outcomes, which in most cases are worse than what you have already. Translating policy into practice requires highly effective, expert, professional staff. You have that. Your staff are committed to this mission. We find their values and expertise provide powerful support for the literacy goals and strategies you seek to implement successfully. And on a personal note, we find them fun to work with. It's hard work, but we're in this together, and it's enjoyable work with Claire and her colleagues. However, policy is great by itself, but it's not good enough if the implementation isn't as strong as it could be. You as a board, the BESE as an organization can do more to build on these strengths. I would say that opt-in participation to these reviews is not an equitable way to ensure that all Massachusetts students receive high-quality literacy instruction. And as I said a minute ago, the state should and could do more to incentivize and expect schools and districts to commit to high-quality material and professional development for classroom teachers. Most of your teachers were prepared in an era when the science of reading or evidence-based reading instruction was not a white-hot educational issue as it is today, both in Massachusetts and around the country. They did not have the advantages that we hope teacher candidates going through programs are receiving now. And so helping them to get better and looking for ways to incentivize their schools to help them get better, as I know they want to, will strengthen your implementation. Thanks for the chance to do this and to work in the state. It's great to be working in Massachusetts. So,
thank you so much, Ed. I have a minute of closing remarks, Mike, and then I will turn it over to you for discussion. As we wrap up, I just wanted to leave you with a glimpse of what we are planning going forward. We will continue to expand access to the free, confidential, formative feedback reviews to more organizations through spring of 2024. We have almost $1 million devoted toward this opportunity for organizations to take advantage of. We will also be providing professional learning for supervisors, particularly around the classroom literacy observation form. And we'll be publishing a toolkit of PD resources associated with a powerful webinar series about equity and early literacy. And finally, we will be facilitating ongoing communities of practice for faculty to convene and share best practices related to program design, that is aligned to scientifically based early literacy instruction. And I think, having seen a sneak peek, you'll hear a bit about what that could look like in the next panel. So I will leave you with this final call to action by Dr. Nicole Harris, Associate Dean of Salem State University's McEwen School of Education, on the importance of this work in teacher preparation, as we all work to ensure that K-12 students, particularly our most marginalized learners, have access to evidence-based teaching and learning that will finally close that opportunity gap. So thank you for the opportunity to share this with you, and I turn it back over to Mike.
Thank you very much, Claire, and Ed, both of you. That was illuminating. I think it gives us a good sense that the department is not in a dormant place, but is actually most proactive in trying to move things forward. I had not yet introduced my colleagues who were present on the call, but present are Marty West of Harvard Graduate School of Education, and Darlene Lombos, who represents collective bargaining on the board and is of the Greater Boston Labor Council. And I'll defer to both of you in the first instance if you have any reflections, questions, or other thoughts based on what was just presented to us. Yes, Marty, please.
I'll offer an initial reaction and try to make it lead to a question. I found this very helpful as a presentation, and I found it very reassuring to hear that our sort of policy framework and I guess the sort of framework for literacy instruction is in a good place, but I think the implementation challenges are pretty daunting. What I took away from it is that we have a bit of a dilemma, which is that we have a model of teacher preparation in general that relies very heavily, for good reasons, on clinical experience, on practice, and that works well when we're trying to pass on existing practices. It works less well when we're trying to drive major changes in teacher practice, which I think is the right way of thinking about what we're trying to do here. And so it's no surprise then that the pain point seems to be the quality of students' clinical experiences and the partnership sites. And so I guess my question is, are there ideas from other states about how to sort of solve that problem? You know, is it limiting the districts or schools that can host teacher candidates for their clinical experience? Is it well, I don't know. So are there ideas about how to sort of get through that dilemma?
I could.
You wanted to go first, Ed, and then I'll build on it?
Sure. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. First, Marty, I'll offer a couple of ideas, but I don't want to overlook also the need to improve the coursework, because we certainly found that as an improvement area almost across the board. But
that one seems more tractable, though. In some sense,
you really
well, maybe not. It's hard. I've joked about how hard it is to change what higher ed faculty do. So
what I would say there, I think, is there are ways, for example, of mapping onto the placement opportunities that programs look for themselves. So Massachusetts has good data on where these investments in HQIM and teacher professional development are happening. And so maybe making those more visible so that the match, in the way that medical school graduates are matched for residencies to teaching hospitals, you can find places that are already doing work and then build out from with the districts and the schools that are not yet investing in HQIM and in teacher professional development. So I think there's a way of imposing intentionality on what sometimes seems like a somewhat random process.
And I want to acknowledge that, you know, the work happening in our K-12 districts is simultaneously happening alongside the work in our preparation providers. So there is angst, and we're seeing a lot of momentum that we're trying to capitalize on and leverage in K-12. So we are seeing thousands of teachers taking advantage of professional development opportunities that have been available over the last year. We're seeing more and more districts, over, I think, close to almost 70 districts to date, changing their instructional materials to ensure that they're evidence-based and of high quality. And I appreciate Ed's suggestion about just making this more visible to our prep providers so that they can make informed decisions about where they're seeking to place candidates in their field-based experiences. But I do see the momentum shifting, and we can't let up. We have to continue to provide equivalent support in both spaces.
And is that part of the program approval criteria or the review process at all? The sort of thoughtfulness and quality of the partnerships and sites that programs are providing? Okay.
Yes, both field-based placements and partnerships are discrete domains, so to speak, that we evaluate through the program approval process.
Very good. Darlene, is there anything before I jump in?
I just really appreciate that deep dive. That report on, I had so many questions about were the same SOs the ones that had this, needs improvement in all the categories. I mean, I had some of those kind of questions that were more about details that probably as a board member don't need to know about, but we're curious. I just appreciate the deep dive. I appreciate just the level of intentionality around improvement. It's similar to, I have a sister who's a nurse, and we talk a lot about the culture of dealing with immediate life and death situations. And so the need to communicate and be responsive and to always evaluate and to always give feedback. And in some ways that industry, it's industry or organizational culture is different because there's like this sense of urgency and immediate life and death situations. And I feel like we have been in this sense of urgency, but it doesn't feel like immediate because it's not life or death, but in the long run it is. It can be such a 20 years having this gap is just it follows us throughout our lifetime. So that's all just to say that I feel like it's nice to have canaries in the mine. It's nice to have a shift in culture and framework. And again, it's really hard to reorient a ship that's so big. It's all of you all who have been in education much longer, just that culture shift of what we're learning now and how to make it better. I know how hard that can be in general. And my question is, what do you need from us on the board? Like, how can we help? I'm always like, what can we do for you and help ease along the way in moving this ship in a different direction?
I just want to acknowledge, I think, the 6 organizations that participated in these reviews this past year. I think there was a degree of bravery that went along with that choice.
Yes.
And so I'm grateful to them. I won't speak for them. I hypothesize they all had their different reasons for participating. I wouldn't say that these 6 are representative of the state because we don't know. I had the same question, Darlene, how do those ratings track across all 6, but I'll never know because these are confidential reviews so that these organizations can really engage in a no stakes continuous improvement activity. And in response to your question about what do we need from you, I would just say, we're trying to pull every lever we have right now in our existing authority. And I work closely with Catherine Tarka, who's listening in as well as the director of the Office of Literacy and Humanities. And so we are pulling every lever we can. And if there are opportunities or questions you have about what we need, it's usually resources to support these changes. Because institutional change takes time and support.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Few comments from me, and then we'll move on to the second panel. First, we have tried to frame all of the work of the subcommittee in the context of the racial equity decision-making tool that the department is engaged in. So I was particularly mindful when you talked about the needs for ed prep programs to be focusing on coursework that supports diverse learners. One of the earliest topics that we tackled is about multi-language learners. One of the biggest takeaways from that was some data that suggests having a second language as you begin your early childhood experience is established as an asset. Kids who are former LEP students, when they're measured in the third grade, tend to perform as well or a little bit better than the general population, although that is not the case for students who are receiving language services. So, there's something to be learned there, but I think one of the most important places to learn it is with emerging educators who are going to spend a career advancing that work. And so I think that involves course design. It involves innovation in classroom practice, and maybe trying to direct in classroom practices to the more diverse classroom settings that are available in different places around the Commonwealth.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a takeaway that I was very glad to hear from in this report, because that is an important element of what we're trying to do here. On the topic of continuous and sustained improvement, correct me if I'm wrong, Claire, but the sort of gradation of program approvals that we're going to have now, where there's probationary, conditional. I think conditional may have existed previously for programs that are problematic, but the additional grades, it's more of a stick than a carrot. But I think that's a relatively new innovation, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm just wondering, on the carrot side of things, is there any consideration to finding ways to really highlight the programs in Massachusetts that are delivering the best evidence-based instruction to their students in a way that recognizes them as champion or exemplary programs at some point in the future?
Well, you're going to hear from a couple in a moment, but one of the things that we hope to do in this coming year is to facilitate a series of communities of practice that do highlight and center some of the programs that are really out in front of this. So they can share best practices related to course design, programs of study, thoughtful field-based placements, and intentional partnerships. So over the course of this coming year, we're hoping to put a lot of our partners in ed prep programs kind of in that driver's seat to start to disseminate a lot of those best practices that we know are out there.
Great. Yes,
Could I jump in for a second with to kind of respond, Mike, based on stuff we've seen in other states? One thing that can be helpful is providing programs with support. It's one thing to rate them, needs improvement or worse, but people are doing the best they think they can do with the capacity that they have, and has been our experience. And in states and other initiatives where we've worked, where there's been a proactive effort to provide support, whether it's money, incentive grants, or technical support from outside to help people get better. And the second thing is, honestly, I would suggest you consider a shorter review cycle than you have. 7-year review cycle means, for instance, that a 5-year-old entering kindergarten this fall will be 12 before she or he can be assured of having a high quality teacher in every district in Massachusetts on the basis of a 7-year cycle. And having shorter cycles is an iterative way of supporting change on a faster way. Again, easier to say than to do, but what that's worth.
Yeah, a great thought. My immediate thought on that is, given the number of programs, and including much programmatic work that's outside of the early literacy sphere, that would actually require some additional resourcing within the department, or else we'd end up doing frequent reviews at a much more surface level, which may not gain us very much. One final thought that, also, I very much appreciated the sort of transitioning into thinking about or professional development work for in-service teachers that you mentioned as an absolute gotta have, I think, because much of what we're now learning we should do in teacher preparation wasn't available to a large part of our existing workforce. And that's absolutely the case. And I think that will be a topic for another day for us. But one area I think does in preparation that matters for that is the preparation of administrators, that just as many more seasoned teachers may not know what they don't know, that can be even more true of an elementary school principal who perhaps came out of a secondary teaching experience. Why would they know anything about the details and nuances of this work? If you ask them to work on Scarborough's rope, they might literally look for a rope. So, I think some thought to how do we prepare our administrators so that they are effectively thinking about what does the onboarding of new teachers mean? What does the skill enhancement of their existing workforce look like in a context where we know best evidence-based practices might not be where they need to be. So I just put that thought out there. And with that, thank you both very much. And my colleagues have any additional thoughts or questions, I'll move on to panel number 2. And thank you both very much. I think this was exactly what I was hoping it would be. So with that, by the way, this was not accidental, but I believe a third of the participants in the TPI US study are represented here. And in addition to that, part of what I think is helpful to us in understanding this is to hear from actual practitioners in the field. And so they are represented through 3 universities with ed prep programs who are with us today. And so I'll do very brief introductions and then we'll move straight into it. So with us is Dean David Shard of the Boston University Wheelock College of Education and Human Development. As with everybody else, I just stole your bios right off the internet. So, I'll kind of hit the highlights and move on. You'd also been a founding dean of Simmons School at SMU in Dallas. And you've created a vision setting and strategic planning process resulting in a guide star focused on equity and justice at BU, which I believe much of this conversation actively relates to. And just hitting to some quick highlights. You're also a member of the International Academy for Research and Learning Disabilities, and you've served in leadership roles in numerous professional organizations, as well as a long career in secondary higher education at places such as the University of Texas at Austin and the University of Oregon. Following Dr. Shard, we will have Stephanie Grimaldi from the Westfield State University out here in Western Massachusetts, as I'm speaking to you from Holyoke. And Stephanie, I've got to look away from the screen momentarily while I find the bio you had sent to me. But in short term, what I do know is this. Dr. Grimaldi is a educator for 25 years, professor of education and interim department head at Westfield State University, where you've taught undergraduate and graduate programs courses for the past 15 years. Prior to your tenure at Westfield, Stephanie was the K-5 department head for literacy at the Lexington Public Schools for 6 years. You've also worked as a reading specialist and a 4th grade teacher in schools in Massachusetts and New York. And you were a charter corps member for Teach of America. Also, where I first got to know you is as the vice president of the Massachusetts chapter of the Reading League. And then following that, also out here in the beautiful Pioneer Valley is Phyllis Hakeem, a professor at Bay Path University. Phil serves students at Bay Path in the Reading Specialist Practicum program as a supervisor and as a faculty member. Mrs. Hakeem has been employed in higher education for the past 14 years, and her academic interests include the neuroscience surrounding the acquisition of language and literacy, reading research, assessment, and sheltered English instruction. Phyllis recently retired from a 15-year career as an academic instructional literacy coach and reading interventionist. She maintains her Massachusetts license in elementary reading specialist, moderate disabilities, and administration license. Phyllis received her BS at Chestnut Hill College and her master's at St. Joseph's Institute of Religious Studies and her tags at the Mass College of Liberal Arts. In addition, she's a member of the New York State Academy of Teaching and Learning and is a New York certified technology integration specialist. And so again, these are folks right on the front line preparing our educators in different capacities as we speak. And so beginning with you, Dr. Shard, I will turn it over to you to kind of tell us what's happening in the world of ed prep.
Thank you, Mike. I want to just thank the other members of the panel and certainly members of the subcommittee for inviting me to be part of this group. I also want to add to an earlier point made about Claire Abbott and Catherine Tarka and their colleagues at BESE. This is my 6th or 10th or 12th State Department to work with. There is no one like the Massachusetts State Department in terms of wanting to improve educational outcomes for children. This is not a typical way that state departments operate. So I just want those of you who have only been in Massachusetts need to hear that. It's very important information. And I also want to thank Ed Crow and TPI US. This is not my first time working with them. So I prepared some remarks. I'm going to read from those. Otherwise, many of the things that have been said would kind of cause me to go off into distractions. But let me begin by saying that the TPI US inspection gave us an opportunity to assess the nature of our early literacy development and in our teacher preparation programs kind of across the board at Wheelock College at BU. Recently, my husband took our little electric vehicle to a local service station in our hometown to have it inspected. And everyone who lives in Massachusetts and owns a motor vehicle has to go through this process annually. He came home rather upset because our car has this pesky feature that's inadvertently set off through regular use. And if you have to follow a particular procedure to reset it. We hadn't done that, of course, and the inspector failed us on the inspection. The light isn't the single most important part of the auto inspection, but it is an indicator of the car's roadworthiness. And after all, determining its roadworthiness is the goal of the state's auto inspection process. In that case, it was a simple fix, a reinspection, and we were good to go. It seems to me the use of an inspection team to also look at the adherence of our teacher preparation programs and their alignment with state expectations in early literacy is a very reasonable approach to ensuring that we are doing our very best to prepare teachers to enter the classroom and to use validated evidence-based approaches to teaching youngsters to read independently in the early grades. As I mentioned, this was not my first experience with Ed and TPI US. I worked with him and his team in Dallas when I was the dean of the Simmons School at Southern Methodist University. What I expected from them was that they would be thorough and unapologetic in their work and their findings. We were not at all surprised at the results of their inspection. In fact, our faculty at BU Wheelock was well aware of the shortcomings of our program, had begun to hire greater expertise in early literacy, and were actively working on a major revision of our courses to align with the BESE early literacy framework. Nevertheless, having TPI US experts look at our programs provided us with an important baseline information and further fuel for our work. The beauty of the inspection, as Ed has laid out, is that it compared with other efforts of this nature, it endeavors to examine every aspect of preparation, from syllabi content to coursework to practical experiences, and to the perceptions of students and alumni regarding their sense of preparedness at various stages of the preparation process. One area, which has already been mentioned, which I believe we have a formidable challenge in, is ensuring that the candidates have high quality field-based experiences aligned with the evidence-based practices that you all are interested in advancing. We are often trying to prepare candidates for a vision of a classroom that doesn't exist in abundance currently in Massachusetts. I understand that many of my higher education colleagues across the United States feel that reviews of this nature are somehow an insult to their expertise as teacher educators. I do not agree. Despite BU Wheelock being part of an independent institution, In our preparation of public school teachers, we act as an agent of the Commonwealth, and we hold ourselves accountable for preparing teachers well for our children and their communities. If you'll indulge me, I have one last comment, which is a word of caution for the special committee and for the board generally. The so-called science of reading, which this is almost my 40th year in the field, so I've known well the science of reading. It is not the only science with which we are charged to prepare teachers as they take professional positions. There is research in many aspects of child development, learning sciences, linguistics, mathematics, psychology, science, self-regulation, writing, critical thinking, and the list goes on and on. Somehow we are expected to do this without certainty that our teachers will be adequately compensated or further supported in their careers to deepen their knowledge and continue to grow and improve as educators. It seems to me that one of the greatest challenges you face as state leaders is to ensure that you don't follow the path of some states that have cherry-picked a single issue of practice while ignoring all other areas of significance, and then find themselves satisfied to have fixed the little light on the dashboard while the rest of the automobile fails to run. Thank you for your time, and I'll pass it to my next panelist.
I believe that's me, right, Mike?
I think that's right, Stephanie.
All right, Helene, can you pop up my slides? It starts with like a flow chart. And the slides really aren't anything but a reminder for me, just so everyone knows. It's not like this deep thing. But while that's getting queued up, I'm going to say yes to everything David said. So agree, concur, check. Especially around the supports and resources and availability of the DESE. I think one of the things people need to know, that if you need something, literally you can email or call and someone will respond to you. And that to me is like a gift that you don't get very often. And I also want to, again, thank TPI because, yes, we were one of the 6, and we were in an interesting position when they came through because we are teaching out an old program and teaching in a new program. And so it was kind of a mishmash. So some things were validated for us in these reports in our original thinking. And some things we knew that we needed to fix were demonstrated that we actually needed to fix them. So we did fix them. You could do the next slide, Helena. So I just want to also say that Westfield, like the DESE and probably every other institution, we're always in a cycle of continuous improvement, and sort of the conversation around deeply looking into revisioning our programs began in 2014. Our department is grounded in 5 pillars. Now it was originally 4, which was critical engagement with diversity, social justice, building community, and reflective practice. In 2014, we decided we really needed to add a scholarship pillar, that students needed to see themselves as scholars, that education was a field that was very deep in knowledge, and that it was not a simple I like kids thing, so I'm going to teach and I'll be good at it. So that conversation began in 2014, and we also did a deep reflection around what we thought our strengths were and our top 3 fixes. In 2015, that focus started. One of the things we were really thinking about is maximizing students' experiences in the field. They weren't actually getting that much time in the field where they were working. They were observing a lot, but they weren't necessarily engaged in practice. And so we started thinking about that. That led us to realize later on that we were a little siloed, that our courses were individual courses and we weren't really a program. And so we really wanted to dig in a little deep about how to make the programs be programs. And then we sort about thinking about what big ideas we wanted kids to come out, students to come out, that were tied to our pillars. And then in like 2018, 2019, it was like a perfect storm, because we have got official confirmation that we no longer needed a second major. We were in a financial crisis at Westfield State, and they said, get rid of the second major because that's going to save us some money. New SMKs came out, right? New observation, the gateways came out around that too. So all of these things were coalescing into this opportunity for us to say, you know what? We're going to blow up the house and rebuild a new one. So if you go to the next slide, Helene, you'll see that we began mapping everything that we needed to think about. And this goes back to David's point, right? There is a lot. Becoming a teacher is not just really being well-versed in literacy and the science of reading, but it requires a lot of other components that we need to think about, juggle, and make sure students are able to implement on day one, ranging from building safe learning environments for their students to giving them a deep knowledge base in which they can actually apply some of the science of reading foundations in order to become critical thinkers. So we laid that all out. And if you want to do the next slide, Helene, this is sort of, I'm a very visual person, so I like make graphics for everything. Then we made our T-map, right? Like, how are all our trains going to run so that they're building upon each other? So you'll see that there's a lot of intersection. We tried to have them all intersect through our methods classes, right? That would ultimately dump into practicum. So that's just a visual of us building a program. Ultimately, as it relates to literacy, foundational literacy knowledge in our program, if you want to go to the next slide, Helene, this is kind of what happened, and something didn't come out there. So now, which is different than in our old program, all of our majors, elementary, ec-ed, and moderate disabilities, take a 3-course literacy sequence. So our seniors, current seniors, are closing out our old program. I'm talking about our first year sophomores and juniors now. They are required to take a 3-course literacy sequence. And through those 2 of those classes, we are looking at all those foundational reading skills, vocabulary, comprehension, fluency, assessment, writing, disciplinary literacy, children's literacy, and associated practice within the confines of a college classrooms. But those all now culminate in an apprenticeship course where the students are going to go to either a boys and girls club or to a school, and they are going to essentially tutor a student in that classroom under the supervision of the faculty member and the classroom teacher or whoever's working at the Boys and Girls Club. One of the reasons we decided to do this goes back to those field experiences. We often found that students could get to practicum and have never seen, let alone taught, a reading or writing lesson because of the way schedules ran, right? Because if our students had time on Tuesdays from 1 to 3 to go do their field experiences, it was unlikely that they were going to see literacy, right? It was more likely that they were going to see either a special or social studies or science in whatever sort of watered down form they saw it in. So we really wanted them to have opportunities to really dive in, specifically around phonics instruction, to be quite honest with you. And this is another place where DESE's really supported us because through their work with Appleseeds, we now have, an open source curriculum, because we cannot buy all the curricula that are out there and let our kids think about those in multiple ways, what they're going to see. So now we have a base curricula that we can use within our classrooms across these 3-course sequence where they can do a deep dive and build some curriculum literacy and then have an opportunity to apply it. So we were yay on DESE on that. We also, going back to our sort of T-map, we really thought about how we're front loading and expanding this core knowledge, right? And all of the content in those 3-course literacy sequence is touched upon in required language development classes that our students take, in a couple of our redesigned special education courses, in our methods courses. We're really trying to have them be systematic. Our methods courses are grounded in other content areas. So we have a math one, science one, and a history one, but at the foundation of those are literacy, to have them apply their understandings and building their knowledge base in order to sort of do the deep literacy work we want them to do. And then we also have the SEI course that is, I think, and this is where DESE or the board can help us, I think needs to be relooked at. in terms of its alignment to evidence-based practices for multilingual learners, and so on. We also, in our redesign, we developed areas of focus for our students where they can hone in on a particular area of interest for them. One of those is a language and literacy area of focus where they'll take 4 or 5 additional classes related specifically to that area. But we're continuing to work. We're not like we're not done, right? So we're continuing to work. We continuously are working on improving our integration across our courses and our programs, and in the provision of meaningful practice opportunities within our own college classrooms and what we see outside. We are running into the problem that we have many students. We're a relatively large program and not so many placements, and quite honestly, a lot of competition in the area for placements. We also have an additional barrier, so to speak, that we can't supply transportation to our students. So we are requiring our students to find their own way to their placements. We do not have any placements that are walkable. None, essentially. We have some on bus routes, but those are kind of difficult. So it does rely on students being able to transport themselves, which is incredibly difficult for them. We also are working with our program supervisors, because we actually have to hire a lot of adjuncts to do that kind of work because our faculty is tapped, right? We all have a 4-4 load. But with them, we are working on helping them provide effective feedback to our candidates that is actionable and meaningful. And that definitely came out of the TPI report that we got. And as part of that continuous improvement things, we're slated to pilot an elective course on straight up on dyslexia, which ultimately really is a course on MTSS. And again, I have to go back to the BESE for a lot of their foundational resources and information that support being able to develop being able to develop courses easier, because there's so many resources available that are available to in-service teachers. So it sort of makes sense that we would use those materials that are very, very informative and helpful and well-written and accessible to provide that kind of instruction for our students. The last thing I want to say that is new to our program, we've always had a course in critical multicultural education. In our new program, we have now added a pedagogy course specifically aligned to that class as well. So where our students will be engaged in a course that is going to bring in literacy, but is also going to be focused on culturally responsive and linguistically responsive practices in its own domain and shape and whole thing for them. So we're really excited about getting this full cycle through. We're actually kind of excited for our approval cycle. I think that we've done a lot of good work. We have more good work to do. I concur that there needs to be some faculty professional development still. I concur that, well, at least for the public colleges, money is always helpful for us because we struggle in that area. And I look forward to the day when we're both pre-K 12 and higher ed are cycled up and synced, so that the field placements are kind of a breeze, right? That we know we could kind of ask anyone, and we know we're going to get a really good look from for our candidates. Oh, and the last thing, we also added a seminar to our methods courses so that they would always have a standard opportunity to debrief their field experiences without cutting into the content of their methods class. So we sort of put an add-on to that. So we've been working really hard, and we're really kind of excited about the work, and TPI helped move the needle for us, and BESE provided us with a lot of the resources. So I think Massachusetts, if you're getting prepared in Massachusetts, you're in a place where you're gonna be resourced and supported along the way. You might take a minute for us to get all the way through, but foundationally, I think we have really great people behind us, and that makes the work easier in a lot of ways. So on that, Phyllis, you're up.
Okay, thank you, Helene, for moving my slides. I really want to begin by stating that I'm honored to be present. And like David, I might do some reading for my talking points to save us some time. I'm also acknowledging, Darlene, that sense of urgency and that call to action, right? This defined intent for teacher preparation. My hope is that we're always going to be building teacher capacity, but as a sustained priority, right? Our postures are invitation, we're bearing witness, but we're sending forth all of our candidates, hopefully with this expertise in our profession as professional learners still, right? And also that we have due diligence. I think the time demands due diligence, that we embrace models that are evidence-based and evidence-tested. I do have to say we were not part of the TPI experience. However, we were part of the International Dyslexia Association's accreditation experience, which is a 1.5 year long experience of oversight. So I do want to share that with all of you. I'm going to speak today in like 10 different talking point slides that I'm going to be speaking about the reading specialist programs of licensure, which is a second initial license. But we're sharing this with you because the model could be adapted, right, to all initial licenses. So we want you to look at this conversation that we're having today through that lens. So my second slide is model essentials. What do we need? So some of this is going to echo what Ed said earlier. Highly qualified faculty, right? You need supported cohort of candidates. You need courses of study, instruction, and practice established in reading science, which I'm so thrilled includes more than just the jargonized science of reading. We're talking about implementation science. We are talking about a body of research that we know has efficiently and effectively served our students. We are here to celebrate BPU's reading programs. We have 5 of them that received accreditation plus from IDA. So I say that, but I also say that our celebration is one of humility and regard for the complicated dialogue still needed to sustain this high standard, right? Today, we're going to share this model in humility with the Commonwealth. So these slides, I'm going to talk about also a quality online platform, rigorous licensure practica, and what to look for when hiring, and also maybe some future directions for DESE. Slide 3. So highly qualified faculty. Well, of course, we look at their program and their degree and their publications. We expect, though, a deep knowledge of the structured approach to student learning and implementation science. We also expect deep knowledge in established reading science. And again, I'm alluding to that 40-year body from neuroscience, from linguistics, from all of those fields. Post-degree training and ongoing professional development. Also for us, online teaching experience, adept with learning management platforms, and certifications beyond their postdoctorate, right? So we're looking at a sampling. Also, their licensure and employment, maybe teaching as a literacy professional in the field, leadership roles matter, and also that they can actually provide a teaching demonstration over Zoom. So where do we begin? Vigilance in the hiring process. Tension does exist in that many faculty in higher ed recognize that they can't teach what they don't know or model what they have no practice in doing. So my motto is practice makes permanent. So be careful what you practice and do no harm. Next slide. So this is a list of our courses. Actually, faculty support, I'm sorry, if you could go, I think my slides are out of order, but I'll go to faculty support. So we want it to be the norm in higher ed that all faculty engage in coaching, common planning, as well as faculty observation of each other's teaching. Like a pineapple chart, come and visit my Zoom class. New hires remark that they have never experienced this level of support before. All faculty, adjuncts included, in the reading programs come to faculty meetings. So we have orientation where we go over their roles and responsibilities. We have our program director has direct conferencing. We have observations of each other, but also the program director does observations. Our syllabus development and resources, we have coaching sessions for that. We have, of course, our learning management system, but we offer training. We have Canvas, Google, and Zoom coaching. We also have common planning time when more than one section is taught. And again, those full faculty meetings. Next slide. So I'm going to my diverse profiles of candidates. So why wasn't I taught this in my undergrad or in my graduate programs? I wish I had $1 for every time I heard that. Yeah. So at a time when enrollment in colleges and universities in the country is down, we're opening new sections of our courses. Our graduate students want the convenience of online study, and they share the experience of feeling cheated as undergrads or grads, and that's a deep wound that needs to be heard and remedied. Being online, our students have voiced that they have prized the opportunity to deeply interact and build community with people, varied levels of service, elementary, middle, high school, backgrounds. We have educators, of course, classroom, but we also have those from specialized settings. We have administrators, advocates, consultants, people in library science who are seeking this out, speech and language and special education. So they're choosing this convenience. They're seeking also Orton Gillingham associate level certification. All our programs have Orton Gillingham certification. If you are going to be a reading specialist in Massachusetts, you have a second practicum. You have the Massachusetts licensure practicum on top of your Orton Gillingham. Welcoming multiple levels of advisement. The students welcome having advisement, not just one advisor. And integrating learning into their existing practices immediately is something that is a hallmark. So the deliberate practice piece is so prized. Building a community of literacy professionals beyond completion. Let's see. Again, we're proud that our programs are attracting candidates. Are you ready? From Hawaii, Oregon, Korea, Canada, Georgia, Illinois, Vermont, Connecticut, and on and on and on. So they're getting that wonderful diversity of experience as well. Next slide. So here's our courses. Candidates share that they want that rigor that bridges the gap between reading, science, and practice. They're online. They're on Facebook. They're seeking out books and authors. They've read Dehane and Seidenberg and Kilpatrick. So they're being really prudent in their decisions. When they say, I want to fill my toolbox like Jessica from Pittsfield Public Schools, I say it'll be more like a tool shed. They question how a college or university can offer the scope of content and practices needed to develop expertise in one 6-week reading overview course. I'm sorry. They want value for their hard-earned money and for the sacrifice of dedicating time away from family for study. When Janet Stratton moved the highly successful programs from the Reading Institute to Bay Path University, it was the perfect time for us to re-examine, as all of you are sharing, your structure, your content, your materials, your resources, your methods, in order to continue to bridge evidence-based and, I would say, evidence-tested research to practice. The result is what's being shared today. 11 courses, 2 practica. A hallmark of the programs are the constructs studied, obviously, through the multiple lens of evidence-tested curriculum, structured approach to instruction and assessment. To speak to high-quality instructional materials, yes, we have to have reading specialists who can look at high-quality instructional materials and, from their sense of expertise at the get-go, give that expert advice. We don't want them to have to wait when they're being hired. Students get a deep dive, are you ready, into oral language, the full hierarchy of phonology, phonics, spelling, orthography, semantics, morphology, vocabulary, deep comprehension. One of my pet peeves, I really have to share this, is when I go to a meeting and a teacher says, and really it's not their fault, there's no blame here, I've done everything, but she just doesn't understand. The issue is comprehension. Well, what part of comprehension? There are huge neurological processes involved, and we have to make sure that we're doing that deep dive, right? And that we're providing that experience of doing that deep dive with our candidates. So we take pride in our commitment to continuous improvement. Next slide. Real quick, I just want to talk about the online platforms. Our candidates frequently comment on how having a standardized organization for the Canvas shells themselves saves them time. So all of the first pages, the home pages are the same. They don't have to waste that cognitive energy, right? Finding things. I mean, these are the practical nitty-gritty things that really make a difference. They know how to navigate the learning management system. It allows for energy to be focused on the tasks of study, assignments, multiple methods of checking for understanding, and we have synchronous sessions for deliberate practice dedicated to that. It is during these sessions that the structured approach, direct, explicit, sequential, systematic, cumulative, multimodal, and diagnostic, we all know it, is modeled by all our instructors and observed by all of our instructors. Students engage in consolidation of their online study. They have retrieval practice. We do interleaving. We do deliberate practice with both peer and instructor feedback and collaborative learning opportunities. So yeah, it's big. It really is big. And we're almost done. Next slide. Assessments and product sampler. So yes, we have to rethink, what are we asking them to do? What are they producing in these platforms? We have a portfolio of MTSS instructional support called Closing the Gap or Enrichment, where they actually have to consider all of the variables. But what's happening in tier 1? What's happening in tier 2? What's happening in tier 3? Is there continuity and intensification? This becomes a portfolio for them. Strategy implementation reports modeled after SEI. We're doing a portfolio of them in semantics and syntax and knowledge, right? I mean, this becomes really important. And the list goes on. Parent brochures, really, how are we reaching out for parent partnerships? Are we preparing our candidates to be able to do that? Can they prepare a faculty newsletter, letter? Action research proposals? And how can they really do a needs assessment and a final literacy strategic plan? That is what is the charge that BESE is putting all of us, right? Your school improvement plan, your district improvement plan. Okay. Our students embrace being agents of change, hone their interactions with their colleagues at work, who become curious about the dynamics they are witnessing. Why? Because it isn't happening in all the districts that our candidates are in. All right. Now, the next slide is the practicum. Of course, we have a deep respect for the requirements that Massachusetts has established, but we align all of our work with not only the professional standards for teachers or the subject matter knowledge guidelines, the new ones, and the Massachusetts curriculum framework standards, but also the IDA knowledge and practice standards for teachers. Next slide. And so our reading practicum, we wanted to showcase some things that happen in the actual Massachusetts licensure practicum. You know, we all have to log hours, but what we do differently is when they log their hour or hours, they have to say, what is the activity? What is the purpose of what they're doing? And then what are the results? And how do those results inform future instruction? So you're not just putting from 2 to 3, I did this. Do you see how that dives deeper? We also have supervisor practitioner monthly feedback forms. We have required supervisor and practicum supervisor, and supervising practitioner training with ongoing support by a lead practicum supervisor and practicum advisor. We have rating charts. So we're going beyond what was required by BESE, right? To see if our candidates are aligning to all these standards. We also have a comprehensive lesson plan, demonstration when they're in the field and these practicum supervisors are observing the teaching demonstration. We have a field note taking form, and then we have our 3-way meeting where coaching happens. Everyone shares their field observations, we have coaching, and then we fill the observation form and our candidates self-reflect. So we've taken extra steps, as you can see. Everything is, there's no paper. Everything is housed in an e-binder. All signatures are digital. Our seminar for the practicum, the Massachusetts, the second practicum for some students, is 5 Saturday sessions. And they are so happy that they are a community of literacy professionals. So my last 2 slides really address what should an administrator look for in a highly qualified literacy professional. So we're returning to that urgent call to action and teacher preparation. We've made some suggestions for administrators when hiring. I'm not going to read the slide, but you can see that it's really important. Demonstrate, 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 demonstrate. If your candidates that you're hiring cannot demonstrate, there is a problem. So my last slide. Massachusetts BESE, you've done amazing work. I've sat on some of those stakeholder committees and the dyslexia guidelines. I'm celebrating that. But moving forward to address what, I'm trying to think. Yes, Martin West, to address what you were saying. How can we make this happen sooner? Get reading specialists in every building. Get a literacy coach as a professional at the district level. Maybe even have an endorsement be considered to keep your license as you did with SEI. Legislative policy, obviously, for teacher prep quality assurance. And then that's those subject matter guidelines that we just talked about. Make sure special education, early childhood, elementary licensure should reflect adherence to the evidence-based knowledge and practice established in that reading science, which is that body that we talked about. So in conclusion, in addition to what has been presented today, training teachers to help students acquire literacy is one of the most noble things a person can do. And so I am thrilled to have been able to present this to you.
So Phyllis and Stephanie and David did have to sign off, but in his absence, thank you to him as well. I think that was a very encouraging, helpful, elucidating overview. Phyllis, I think we've seen in some granular detail where that A came from on the NCTQ report. I'm grateful that many of the practices that you're engaged in are shared here as well. Stephanie, I think you named a very specific Western Massachusetts problem. Living in Holyoke and occasionally needing to visit out in the area of your campus, there's no good way to get to Westfield. And if you don't have a car in Western Massachusetts, you've got a problem. So and not every college student can have a car.
Especially one at Westfield State. I mean, you
right?
know.
Yeah. And so, it's surfacing like those sort of structural challenges that, pedagogy doesn't solve that. It's maybe being heard by policymakers elsewhere. I'm actually wondering, and this is very specific to Western Massachusetts, the places where most of the schools are in the industrial corridor of Holyoke, Chicopee, and Springfield, all of which share highway exits off of the turnpike. And I'm just wondering if Teach Western Mass or some other organization couldn't be instrumental in helping to resource and solve that kind of transportation issue to expand access to the very schools that might most benefit from the practica that would take place. So I just throw that notion out there, and maybe it gets heard, maybe not so much. I also very much appreciate the innovative and efficient way that you are using the DESE resources as pedagogical tools. I think that's a really, really smart approach and much appreciated. So thank you all very much. We're running a little bit beyond where we usually like to stop, but we're not too bad. And I just think there's so much information here that I'm very appreciative of hearing it. I just want to say this one thing as a policymaker who's been very supportive of reading sciences, because I take very seriously David Shard's concern that when we think about policy, that we don't think too narrowly about what the science of reading means. And it is often disparaged as being nothing but a reduction to phonics, which I will tell you as policymakers, we know better. In Massachusetts, there's no sense that that is what it's limited to. But think of how I see the onion unpeeling in my own learning journey as a policymaker. You start off with a nice, simple 2-integer formula in the simple view of reading. The next thing you know, you're presented with a pretty straightforward 5-item pillar set of pillars that you need to memorize, and that's not too hard. And then all of a sudden you go and you read guys like Daniel Willingham, and you find out, well, those pillars aren't actually all the same size, And if you want to really think about it, something like fluency might be relatively tiny, where comprehension's a whole edifice unto itself. And how do you work with that? And then move on to the 8 strands of the reading rope and the fact that we want every single one of them. And then when you're done with that, somebody's going to point out to you, oh, by the way, we're talking about literacy. We don't just want reading. We want them to write well. We want them to have good oral fluency and the capacity to engage in meaningful response and rhetoric. So, do know there are some Massachusetts policymakers, and I'll speak for myself, who've heard it loud and clear and try to make that clear all the time. And also the encouragement from all of you that you are not education schools that are siloed to being oppositional to what we can learn from linguistics and from neurology and from many other fields of studies, but rather are embracing it and trying to expand it to the students. I think that's the goal. I think that's, what you really want are very, very smart people entering the classroom who have a deep knowledge of these basics, as well as all the skills you have to manage a classroom, deal with interpersonal relationships with the student, understand school structures, and then beyond all of that, be able to engage in real discernment when you understand all the elements of the real reading science. So hopefully a little bit of reassurance that as policymakers, we're not all just at a surface level, but also that hopefully we're trying to engage in and have heard today some solid suggestions for some really good policy. And so with that, Claire, if there's nothing else from the department's purview, I'd like to thank you all very much, and I'd like to go ahead and close the meeting. Thank you. I'm deeply grateful to all of you for your voices and participation today.
Thank you, Mike.